We're back with our series of the most powerful legendary lords in Total Warhammer 3 by lore ranking, like how powerful they be in the lore. Before we get started on this list, of course, this is all just my opinion, and you're welcome to disagree in the comments. That's pretty fun. It's fun for people to speculate on who would and wouldn't be strongest. Just try not to be a dick about it, because we're talking about fantasy characters that don't exist, and no one can be right. So, yeah. Let's just all be civil. Now, we've lumped together the three realms of men, Bretonnia, the Empire, and Kislev, just to make a more cohesive list, and some of those factions don't have enough people to make a whole video about. So let's do this. We have 15 legendary lords, and we'll get started at number 15, absolute bottom of the barrel, is Castalton. Castalton is just a crazy old man, honestly. He's trying to reignite the ancient cults of Kislev against, I guess, Katarin. He kind of hates her a lot, but yeah, he's just trying to get the great bear god to smile upon Kislev once more. He has a flaming sconce, but that's not even like a magical weapon. It's just a flaming sconce that he hits people with. He's incredibly limited on magic items, and he's not that good of a melee combatant in any way. He is just a fanatic. He's not even a good general. Like, you could kind of say, like, oh, well, like, maybe his tactics are really good and all this stuff. No, not particularly. He just kind of sits there and he goes, charge! And everybody sprints straight at the enemy in a bunch of, religious fervor. So, yeah, he is definitely the weakest of all of the lords of men. Oh, Castalton, you silly goose. Coming in at number 14 is Boris Todbringer. Now, this might be a bit controversial, but before you get mad at me, I do say I only count people's mounts as part of their power ranking if their mounts are named and unique, and Boris does not have any. In a lot of his stories, he's riding various horses. His Griffin mount, as far as I know, isn't like canonically tied to him like Deathwing is tied to Franz, so he does not get the benefit of riding a Griffin around, which does limit him extremely. Boris is an incredibly courageous general, a very good politician, and a complete asshole. He is just a stick in the mud to Karl Franz all the time, and though he serves the Empire as faithfully as possible, he is not a traitor in any means. He is also very rude and constantly questions Karl Franz's authority, but when there is evil, he gets on board. Speaking of evil, he became obsessed with killing the Beastmen in the Drakewald, specifically Khazrak One-Eye. Boris is also one-eyed because they each took each other's eyes at different fights. But, yeah, that is kind of what holds him down to 14 in my opinion, is not having a real mount, so I have to consider just Boris's strength on like a basic horse or on foot. He has some magical items because he is an Elector Count of the Empire, so he has the Drakewald Runefang. And he has some special items that do give him a bit of healing on tabletop, but in the lore, it isn't mentioned as much from what I could see. And honestly, in his final duel with Khazrak, just like reading the duel, nothing about it was too special. Like, he just blocked over and over again as Khazrak swung at him wildly, and then he got like one good shot in with like a good parry and riposte, and like actually used, fencing and dueling tactics versus a wild beastman that was just swinging at him. And then he killed Khazrak and invited all the other beastmen to come fight him, and they did, and they killed his ass. So I don't know. He's good. He's very strong for like a man, and he's a good duelist for a man. But as far as the legendary lords of all of mankind, he does come in at number 14 behind everybody else. Ahead of Castalton at number 13, as he just announced himself for me. At number 13 is Marcus Wulfhart. He does beat out Boris Todbringer. While Boris would beat his ass in a fight, like a straight up 1v1 fight me fight, Marcus would body Boris if he knew that the fight was coming. Like, if he had time to aim his amber bow at Boris, Boris would not stand a chance. One shot from the amber bow would take Boris off of his mount, impale him on a tree, and he would be dead and gone. Marcus Wulfhart's enchanted amber bow is very powerful, and he spends most of his life hunting the various monsters that haunt the Empire. Sometimes in a pseudo witch hunter aspect, like he hears about one in like the Drakewald or near Sylvania, and he'll go hunt it down and kill it. But he does spend a lot of his time on foreign excursions, just killing anything that could threaten mankind's expansion through the world. Because some monsters raided an area where he was living and killed his parents and yada yada. He's Batman. There's a lot of Batmans in Warhammer, but yeah, with his magical amber bow that can even pierce the toughest hides of the scariest monsters in all the world. I mean, he does go hunt lizardmen for gosh sakes. The bow is crazy powerful. I mean, he's 13th on a list of 15, so I'm not giving his bow too much credit, but he could beat Boris, the Mad Elector Count of Midland, and he could beat Castalton quite handedly. I think anybody else on this list, their magical armor or auras or their enchanted items or just their natural toughness is too much for one shot from the amber bow to kill them. And when I'm power ranking the lords in a duel, he is going to get one shot. There's no one on this list that he's gonna like get 3 or 4 shots off because Marcus is unmounted. He just has to run, and everybody else on this list has a freaking mount. So, yeah, and you know, against the mages, he'll have a really bad time. So, yeah, Marcus Wulfhart, very respectable, courageous man, number 13 on our list. Number 12 might come in as a bit of a surprise, but it is Boris Ursus. Now, I know there's 3 or 4 lords that you might be thinking of, and you're like, seriously? Boris weaker than all of them? You can be free to disagree, but from what I read about Boris, again, we're talking about legendary lords. He is impressive for a man. He is strong for a man. But compared to other legendary lords in the Warhammer universe and even in the realms of men, he is pretty whatever, honestly. His bear mount, Erskine, is very strong. It's a very loyal and ferocious beast. And Boris himself is a decent combatant, but he gets himself into trouble with overly reckless charges a lot, and he relies a little too heavily on riding a giant frickin' bear to win fights rather than like true skill or strength. Again, before you yell, he has skill compared to other normal men, but compared to legendary lords, he's not that skilled of a fighter. He is just kind of brash and violent and pushes his weight around, which Erskine's scary versus horses, but, you know, Elspeth von Draken's Carmine Dragon might have a thing or two to say to this bear. So he's going to have a bit of a hard time. Courageous leader, bit reckless, and is more of a general than Castalton is. Like, he'll actually order his troops into good formations and get good things done. But just falls a little bit behind some of the other characters on this list. I feel like I've been saying this a lot, but this is another controversial take. I guess I'm just having a controversial list this time around. But at number 11th, we do have Repanse de Lyonesse. Now, you might be like, absolutely not. She is stronger than Marcus Wulfhart and Boris Ursus. Yes, and I don't know why she's not rendering in properly right now, but she is kind of weird looking. But whatever, that's a solid angle for me to get my point across. First thing I need to throw out is Total War Warhammer apparently does her dirty. As I was digging into her lore for this list, the Fleur-de-Lis banner, you know, the thing that gives nearby allies like melee defensive melee attack. Yeah, that's cool and whatever, but apparently in the lore, she can use that banner to fully redirect spells back to their owner. So if someone casts Blue Fire of Tzeentch at her, she's supposed to be able to hold that up and it goes back and hits them in the face, at least according to the lore. Now, I don't know if she's on tabletop. Some tabletop people are going to be like, it didn't do that on tabletop. Dude, I don't know. I was just reading the lore, and I was like, holy crap, she can do that? So if you try and cast, like, Rancid Visitations on her, she should be able to pop that banner, and it affects the caster instead, so a lot of casters will kill themselves on her. And she apparently used that, plus the Sword of Lyonesse and her Mount Suleiman to drive back Chaos Hordes that had invaded Bretonnia and killed King Louis. Not that Louis. Not Louen, Leoncoeur. Different Louis. Louis the Brave. So, she was a peasant girl. Chaos Hordes had killed the king and were ravaging the lands of Bretonnia. She went to a lake and prayed, and the Lady of the Lake came out to her and said, yo, knights are usually boys, but you seem cool. There's a sword buried in that bush over there. An ancient knight had it. It's really cool. Grab that. Here's the Fleur-de-Lis banner, and also boosh. And she sprinkled some water on Repanse, and Repanse started to glow from within. That's the halo of maidenly wrath. So nearby enemies can get blinded, or if they're demonic, they get hurt when they're just in Repanse's presence. And, you know, in the middle of a duel, she can just, like, all of a sudden strobe flash you and just be like, bam, super bright. And people are like, ah, what the hell? And then she stabs them. So while she doesn't have the ability to fly, obviously she's just on a warhorse mount, and she's not the most insane duelist of all time, she has enough magical properties that aren't properly displayed in Total Warhammer that as I was reading about her, I was like, I mean, honestly, she would probably beat Boris. Just saying. Like, She has enough magic-y stuff and plot armor that Boris's "I'm riding a bear and I am a big man" would only get so far, so she actually probably would beat him. But, you know, it's close. It is close between Repanse and Boris. I'll give you that, but she's a little more magical, a little more badass than the game gives her credit for. At number 10, final of the double digits, we have Alberic de Bordeleaux. He is a Bretonnian lord of Bordeleaux. Haha. He fights side by side alongside Louen and Leoncoeur against many evils, and he does ride his mount. Is it Tempete? I believe it's Tempete and not Tempete, but whatever. So he has a hippogriff mount, which is quite nice. We are finally getting into the flying lords, and the capacity to fly in combat is just such a huge boon when comparing these lords' power level to each other. That, like, it's not like Tempete can't land, like it could function as a warhorse, but it can also fly, which just gives you an entire vertical access to use when you're dueling one of the other lords, and that is a huge boon. Alberic holds the Trident of Manon. It is a slightly magically blessed lance for the, you know, ocean god Manon. But other than that, he actually doesn't have that much magic about him. But what does put him above the plot armor of Repanse or the strength of Boris is just he's actually really strong martially. He's probably the first lord on this list that's actually properly martially scary. Reading his lore, he has not been bested by any champion he's had to face in the defense of Bretonnia, on foot or otherwise. And then you throw him on top of I keep wanting to say Biaki whenever I see a Bretonnian mount that can fly. Anyway, Tempete. You know, it's a very scary, terrifying monster with a terrible attitude while he's slashing at you with a magically imbued trident, and he's apparently a crazy good melee combatant. So, yeah, he's very solid, very strong. I do think he beat Repanse 1v1, because he doesn't... I think the big decider there for me is that he doesn't use spells, and the maybe tiebreaker between them would be Repanse's ability to deflect spells, but he doesn't use any, so I think he would beat her with his extra vertical angle and his superior martial prowess. Because Repanse is blessed by the lady and has a bunch of magical stuff, but she was not trained, you know? She wasn't put through the trials to rise as high in the knighthood as Alberic did. She hasn't slain all these monsters. She was just called to defeat the Chaos Hordes when she was needed, so I think Alberic just would kind of body her in 1v1. Next up is the Queen Hagwitch of the Kislev Wastes, Mother Ostankya. Mother Ostankya is a little higher on this list than I would like, but as I was looking at it, I just couldn't justify putting her lower. Her little sled mount's cool. She has some things in the woods. The biggest problem that I didn't want to put her lower is her capacity to summon. While it's not particularly shown in Total War Warhammer, it was shown in the trailer for the Shadows of Change DLC. Like, if you threaten a Mother Ostankya, she can just, like, say, "You will regret this," and fade away into, like, swamp musk, and all of a sudden a couple elemental incarnate of beasts wander over, you know? And while the incarnate elemental beasts aren't her, you know, so it's not her power level, but the ability to summon them is kind of badass. So it's hard. Because I imagine... Again, looking at the lower people on this list, I imagine a duel with Alberic de Bordeleaux goes like this. Let's say Alberic has a quest to kill this witch, right? That's plausible. She's a witch. So he flies into her swampy tundra area, lands outside her hut, and, like, goes, "Lady, I challenge you!" And then she wanders out, and she's just like, "What do you want here?" And then he challenges her, and she's like, "Okay." And she throws, like, a frog into her pot, and a blue mist comes out, and Alberic's briefly blinded, and then by the time the mist clears, she's gone. There's like 4 or 5 things in the woods glaring at him from the woods, and the trees start to shift and crumble as this incarnate elemental beast walks over and is just like, "Rrr." And Alberic, let's say he beats all of them. It's not like Mother Ostankya is just gonna come out in, you know, come out of the woods and be like, "Ah, you beat all my minions, all right, stab me." So I just don't see her, like, actually staying and fighting him, which makes it hard to do the dueling thing. And then aside from that, so you have to assess their power levels. If there's no way she would duel unless she's an idiot, she's just a magic caster, and in Warhammer lore, that's insanely overpowered. So as far as, like, generals or effect on a battle, she would have way more effect for an army than Alberic would. Just having her on your side would help so much. Whereas Alberic, it's like, okay, you have good military direction, and you have a good combatant, but she can summon a bunch of crazy nonsense. She can make the earth collapse into mud, and everybody where she casts a spell just gets trapped in it, and then it re-solidifies into dirt, and now you're trapped from the waist up into the ground, and you just die. I mean, it's kind of messed up. So, casters are OP, and she does benefit from that, putting her ahead of Alberic. But again, it was close. This, like, 8 through 13. Marcus Wulfhart to the next person we're going to get to is very close, and then I think the top 7 breaks away. But so far, everybody, I could see an argument that Marcus Wulfhart is more powerful than Mother Ostankya. I could see that argument. That's how close these last rankings have been. But, you know, when I thought about it, she deserves a little more credit, so she's number 9. Coming in at number 8, the last of the close ones, in my opinion, is Volkmar the Grim. Volkmar is a way overconfident, zealous idiot who gets himself into a lot of bad situations by just saying, like, Sigmar protects, and sprinting to his death. That's not high praise. He also doesn't have that many magical items. He has some churchy grand hammer. Okay, you need to stop roaring in my ear. He has a bunch of churchy artifacts. He has the War Altar of Sigmar. All that stuff is pretty whatever. It is blessed by Sigmar, and it gives him some modicum of power. But none of that is why he's 8th on this list. Without what I'm about to say next, he would actually be above Castalton, below Boris. So he would be number 14. He is number 8, and I haven't mentioned what makes him number 8. And it is... Volkmar is not what you see in Total Warhammer. He's Goku, and it's kind of insane. So this comes from the main part I saw. This was in his... he needs to stop screaming in my ear. Sigmar's Blood, the book that is just before the end times. It's like a little novella where he goes to fight Manfred von Karstein, and you finally get to see like a warrior priest of Sigmar in action, and he's so awesome. So there's this lake with like this undead stuff, and Manfred casts a spell that gets like a bunch of lake monsters and undead to wake up. That they're all dead, right? So they're like skeleton forms, but some of them are huge. Like some of them are almost Terrorgeist sized abominations. And he wades into the water up to like his waist, and his hands start to glow, and he's like, for Sigmar, and he just starts like karate chopping through giant monsters and obliterating their bones, and you're like, what the actual hell is going on? He's just like, cha, cha, cha. So I don't care about any of his items, his war altar of Sigmar. None of that is the reason he's number 8 on this list. He's number 8 on this list because he's freaking Goku. And to do the similar thing with Mother Ostankya and Alberic, I feel like if he went to Mother Ostankya's, hut, and she came out and she did all the same things we talked about, and he challenged her, I feel like she would cast the mist at him, and he would just wave his glowing hands, and the mist would dissipate, and she'd be like, what? And he'd like grab her by the throat and be like, you are going nowhere, witch, and like slam her into the ground, and then a crater appears there because he's freaking Goku. But just like how he can cast these like incantations on himself that put him into like a Sigmar fugue state. But when he's in that state, he's such a badass melee combatant with just his hands. It's so awesome. I don't know. He deserves number 8. Love my boy. Up next at number 7 is Balthasar Gelt, the Supreme Patriarch of the Orders of Magic within the Empire. And you get that by winning a duel against the previous Supreme Patriarch, who was of the Fire College. The Bright College, the Bright Wizards. So he already beat another very scary combatant in a direct magical duel to get his position as Supreme Patriarch. And with his mount Quicksilver, he is incredibly fast. Quicksilver is the fastest Pegasus in all the Empire. With incredible mobility and just supreme magic capabilities, Balthasar Gelt would beat anybody below him on this list. Mother Ostankya is almost at the top of everybody below him just because of being a caster. Well, he is a caster who is much better than her and faster and can fly. Again, keeping him safe from like Boris Ursus, because he could just stay in the sky and throw spells at Boris until Boris dies. The one caveat is if he fought Repanse, who's at number 11, because Gelt entire relies on flying cheese with spells, Repanse could deflect, like, if he uses his trademark spell, Final Transmutation, that turns an opponent's body into a gold statue and they just become a statue. It's weird to say they die when they kind of cease to exist as an organism. But yeah, I mean, if he cast that on Repanse, she'd just Uno reverse and he would immediately goldify himself and die. So, okay. You lose to one very specific interaction, but you beat everybody else below you here with just being a spellcasting little bitch. So, yeah, Gelt's good. Gelt's strong. He is much more known in the lore for, like, feats of ritualistic importance, like things that take a lot of setup and time, like setting up the Wall of Faith to hold back chaos, setting up the prison to siphon off Sylvania from the Empire and just keep all the vampires locked in it. So he's powerful in that aspect. He just has a hard time transferring that to a duel. But I think Final Transmutation or Searing Doom or any of his battle spells that he has while being able to fly beat the people previously on this list. At number 6, we have Elspeth von Draken. Now a worse mage than Balthasar Gelt, not an impressive melee combatant in her own right, and much more known for political intrigue and mystery than direct combat. What gets her to number 6 on this list is still being a magic caster, still being an amethyst wizard, and riding, of course, a Carmine dragon. Being on a dragon mount does make her extra scary. The Lady of Nuln. So, she helps fight against Tamarkand, but it took her and Theodor Bruckner to take Tamarkand down, and then after that, she was so damaged and exhausted, she had to disappear for many years before kind of reappearing in public life as like this weird shade or aberration. But she does beat Gelt because of her capacity to fly. He wouldn't be able to escape from her for too long. Like, if they were stuck in a duel, he couldn't just fly away, right? Carmine Dragon could keep up-ish with Quicksilver. Would never catch it, but keep in range for, like, amethyst spells from Elspeth or uses breath attack on him. And the Carmine Dragon is such a monster in melee combat that, like, Volkmar would not have a good time. Mother Ostankya would not have a good time. Alberic might do okay against just the Carmine Dragon, but with a Death Caster riding it, I mean, he wouldn't stand a chance. It's just too much to overcome. Because he would have a hard time versus just the Carmine Dragon and then like, oh, I'm getting Spirit Leeged. Oh, my horse, my Tempete just died. That's cool. So, yeah, he wouldn't enjoy that. Carmine Dragon OP, Elspeth, number 6. At number 5 is the Tsarina Katarin herself. Current Queen of Kislev, a very potent ice caster, and she does have her chariot with her many palace guards on it firing off the sides. She can freeze her opponents, which does negate a lot of the flying of people previous on this list, like Gelt or Elspeth. If they got close enough, she would cast a blizzard that would force their mounts to land. Otherwise, they'll be frozen out of the sky, like literally frozen. So negating the flying advantage of a lot of the people previous on this list, being a potent spellcaster, again, as you mentioned, is just how crazy strong it is. And she herself is a solid melee combatant. The daughter of Boris Ursus, he did teach her how to fight. Now, while he wasn't the most impressive fighter to me, I mean, he still taught her how to fight. So she would beat Gelt's ass in a duel. She would beat Elspeth's ass in a duel. Carmine Dragon notwithstanding, though, that does make them very close. I think Elspeth and Katarin were one of the hardest decisions I had to make on this list. So honestly, she's a 5.5 and Elspeth is a 5.5. But I gave the edge to Katarin just because of her connection to Ursus. Ursun? The Bear God. The Bear God gives whoever is currently reigning Kislev just a little bit of extra oomph, a little bit of extra ferocity and strength. And I don't know. That just kind of puts her over the edge for me. Her insane ice magic, as long as she's in Kislev, would probably beat Elspeth. Now, if those two met outside of Kislev, because Katarin's magic gets weaker the further from Kislev she is, it becomes a semantics thing. Like, are they fighting in Kemri? Then yeah, Katarin will lose. Are they fighting in, like, Ostland, which is just outside of Kislev? Katarin would probably still win. But, yeah, I don't know. I think Katarin is a little more powerful at her peak, and we are going to rate people at their peak. So, Katarin takes number 5. A good general, a good caster, a good fighter, a neat lady, and she's supposedly very pretty, which, gotta help. In our number 4 slot, I'm throwing him in here. I know he's a legendary hero, but the Green Knight should honestly be a lord. In power and relevance level, it's just in the game he kind of functions in a hero capacity because he doesn't lead armies. He shows up wherever Bretonnia needs him most and helps out, and usually helps out legendary lords. Now, the reason I feel fine putting him at number 4 on this list is because it doesn't mess with anything. He is not going to be the most powerful Bretonnian lord. In case you're keeping a checklist at home, you know there's 2 that I currently rank above him because process of elimination. So since he didn't even win the category, I thought I'd throw him in here. I do put him above Katarin. But the Green Knight has kind of the capacity to teleport wherever he needs to be in the world. Not like he would teleport in the middle of a battle to like appear behind you, but you know, he can teleport. Seems mostly linked to trees and the land of Bretonnia itself. Similar to Katarin. And while he doesn't have magic, he is supposedly like one of the best duelists of all time. He has a magical blade, the Dolores Blade, where if you have magical protections, it'll probably pierce right through that, because a lot of Warhammer, it's like magic item, pierce magic protection. Got it. No magic item, big lose. So he's spooky in a lot of ways. I do think the people that are above him because they either have direct access to magic or they have the capacity to fly while also being a parallel duelist. Maybe not better. I don't think anybody left on the list is a better duelist than the Green Knight, but they are parallel and they just have other things that keep them above him. But he is spooky. He is the original king of Bretonnia, and he's a badass. Welcome to number 4, sir. Number 3 is the Lady of the Lake, the Fay Enchantress. Well, I don't know if she's exactly Lady of the Lake. It's kind of weird. But she's not the god, the Lady of the Lake. She is the Fay Enchantress is the supreme maiden of the Lady of the Lake. Yeah, because the Lady of the Lake is Leath, the elven god. And that's kind of a big secret. But she also appears on lakes and helps people drink from the cup sometimes, as I try and get my camera perfect. But anyway, she has a unicorn mount, which unicorns are very deadly and aggressive, but they also provide a lot of magic resistance. So some of the other previous mages on this list would have issues dealing damage to her with their spells, and her spells would do a lot of damage back to them. The Lore of Life in the actual lore is a little... It's the finickiest lore, but it's not just like healing and that's it. I mean, she can, you know, pop a tree out of the ground and it'll just grow up and try and like grab you with its tendrils and slam you into the earth. So it's not like she would be helpless in a caster fight, but I don't think Gelt or Elspeth's or even, honestly, Katarin's spells would work particularly well in the Fay Enchantress as long as she was somewhere with growth. Now, if the Fay Enchantress fought Katarin in Kislev, Katarin would win. If Katarin fought the Fay Enchantress in Bretonnia, the Fay Enchantress would win. So then again, I think we go back to just comparing them at their power levels. Somehow these two get in a fight with one patch of Bretonnia and one patch of Kislev next to each other. Somehow, I think the Fay Enchantress comes out on top in that. She has the Mists of the Lady that can disorient and confuse people. She has the ability to just fade into a water source and just disappear entirely, only to resurface somewhere else. So she has a bit of that like in-battle teleportation nonsense. And of course, her healing powers would be very good at keeping her sustained in a fight. Would she win a direct duel sword to sword with any of the combatants around her, even Katarin? No, but that's just not how she fights at all. And she's one of those scary casters with the capacity to like push you, you know, like, you know, if she gets mad, she'll like float a little higher in the air and her hair will go in every direction. She'll be like, "You dare defy me?" And she'll like extend her hand, and then you just like, you get crushed to the ground and you like can't move and you're like, "Oh God, oh, it hurts. My bones are all crushing." She has that kind of magic, which so far none of the other casters we've had have that kind of like pseudo god magic. And I think that's just a different power level that anybody could deal with except for our top 2. I think the top 2 could beat her, but yeah. Fay Enchantress, number 3. Very spooky. Number 2, and by process of elimination, you also know number 1. We have King Louen, Leoncoeur, riding Biaki, his mighty hippogriff mount. Similar to number 1 on this list, flying and armor piercing on top of a spooky monster is very scary. Louen has a magical blade that you can see glowing because he is a Grail Knight, and Grail Knights are blessed by the Lady of the Lake to get incredible power. He is very fast. He has the Lion's Shield to keep him safe from spells and missiles. He is insane, and he has the Blessing of the Lady from being a Grail Knight, which also gives him like kind of not real regeneration. It does in Warhammer, but in the actual like tabletop and that kind of thing, it's more of just an unnatural vigor to keep fighting than true like magical healing powers in combat. Now, if you stabbed him and he went to like a bed and laid down, he would heal faster than a normal man, but we're not talking in combat healing like Throg the Troll King level, you know? So injuries in a battle would stick with him. He's number 2 on this list, so I guess I'll defend number 1 against him when I talk about number 1. So for Lewin's sake, to defend him against everyone below him on this list, He is equally blessed by the Lady of the Lake as the Fay Enchantress, and while the Fay Enchantress has a bit more magic-y stuff, I just think having a similar blessing of the Lady would kind of negate her power over Louen. Like, if she tried to do the, my will, and, like, crush him, I feel like his armor would just grow brighter, and he'd be like, the Lady loves me, and, like, could fight her. I don't know why those two would ever fight, but I'm just saying. Plus his capacity to fly, his superior dueling, and almost equally magically decked out kit. I think her spells just wouldn't be enough to overcome his brutality. I think it could be a close fight overall if her magic wasn't completely negated by plot reasons. But I do put Louen just a little bit over. Because also, he fights greater demons. Like, he kills Kugath Plaguefather in the end times. He does have the help of a Shallian priest, where he was honestly about to lose the duel, but she throws some holy water on Kugath and, like, sizzles him a bit, and then Louen jumps up and stabs him and whatnot. So he needed a little bit of help, but he did beat Kugath Plaguefather, and that's not something I could think of the Fay Enchantress doing. Like, I think she would do, like, that thing, you know, where she's like, you don't belong here, filth, and, like, push him, and he'd go, like, brr, mildly, and then he would, like, reach out and just, like, pick her up and plague the shit out of her. And Louen did beat that guy. So just in my head canon, I can't see the Fay Enchantress beating Kugath, and Louen did, with a little bit of help. But, yeah, Lowen's number 2 on this list. Spooky guy, but he loses to number 1. Number 1, the most powerful legendary lord of the realms of men, is going to be Karl Franz. Now, Karl Franz himself is an okay combatant, solid for a man, but actually less martially skilled than Boris Todbringer. He rides Deathclaw, so that puts him above Boris a bit. Having an actual named mount makes me consider it. So then Deathclaw, his griffin mount is spooky. Yeah, it's a loyal griffin that he raised himself. Incredibly ferocious creature with a pecking beak and then like lion back paws. These guys are huge. They dwarf horses, so anybody with a horse mount would have a pretty tough time against them. But still, that shouldn't put him that high on this list. But Karl Franz is wielding Galmaraz, and that is all you need to be number 1 on this list. Galmaraz is insane. Galmaraz, the Warhammer that the series is named after, is just crazy. He dive bombs in the same book that Louen barely beats Kugath Plaguefather with the help of a Shallian priestess. That is my entire argument. Louen beats Kugath, but loses Biaki in the process and is so wounded and tired afterwards that he dies to Festus the Leech Lord in melee combat when Festus is just swinging a rusty cleaver at him, and Louen impales him a couple times, but eventually Festus gets a good shot in. So Festus is not a good melee combatant, and he takes down Louen because Louen is so tired after fighting Kugath. Now, he fought Kugath, I get that, but the comparison is, in the battle for in the north, in north in Ostland, Karl Franz dive bombs and literally one-shots an Exalted Great Unclean One. Is an Exalted Great Unclean One Kugath? No. But did he one-shot it? Absolutely, he did. And that's a difference of a significant amount of power. The Warhammer is insane, and as long as Karl Franz is wielding it, he is unmatched by any of the other combatants of men. I don't think Louen could hold up against Galmaraz. Now, if he had the Reichland Runefang out instead of Galmaraz for some reason, Franz falls to like 9th, 10th, 11th on this list, somewhere in there. But we're talking about Galmaraz, and Galmaraz is wild. Also, if we're still comparing the end times, I mean, he kind of becomes the incarnate of Sigmar, which is weird, but that one's weird because Franz dies to become that, so I don't know if that counts as Franz or as Sigmar wielding a puppet body. So we'll not count that. We'll just count non-incarnate Franz, and I still think he's number 1 on this list. He's insanely powerful. And then he does lose in combat. He doesn't die yet, but he loses in combat to a Nurgle-blessed Chaos Champion, Blood Dragon Vampire Lord on a zombie dragon mount. And it was a relatively close fight. So that's how he finally loses. And against that, I think Louen would lose. I think the Fay Enchantress would lose. I think the Green Knight would lose. I think everybody would lose versus that OP combination of a character. So Karl Franz will take the number 1 spot for the Realms of Men. The tiebreaker between him and Louen for me, Louen has a lot of more generalist characteristics that make him more powerful, but I think Franz's capacity to just absolutely wallop something in the comparison between the one-shotting an Exalted Grit and Clean One to Lewin's desperate duel versus Kugath, I just put Franz ahead. And also my headcanon, how they'd go is like each fighter would take a charge, and Franz would swing Galmaraz, Louen would swing his sword, and Louen would block with his shield. So like, let's say he swings with his sword, he gets Karl Franz like in the side, he gets a good hit on him or something, Franz is wounded. Galmaraz hitting Lewin's shield would crumple the shield, shatter Lewin's arm, and send him and Biaki tumbling towards the ground in an uncontrolled fall of the sheer power of the Warhammer just claving through you. And its magical imbuements from the dwarves would easily get through any of Lewin's magical Fay Enchantress armor. It's just not a comparison. His weapon is far too strong for Louen to withstand, in my mind. I could be wrong, and I wonder what everyone out there will think of this list. But there you have it, all 15 legendary lords of the realm of men ranked. Hopefully I provided decent enough reason for them to be where they are. If you disagree, go ahead and comment. It feeds the algorithm, you know. It's good stuff. Just be nice. Like, if you disagree, just be like, oh, I disagree because of this. Not, your list is trolling and you're an idiot. Where? That's less cool.
Subscribe, yes.